This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, we're here in the city of Berlin. Who would have thought that a group of Fruma Yidden would be here in the city of Berlin? We're at the gravesite of Rav Hildesheimer. If anyone out there could actually get us into this cemetery, we would be most appreciative. So Rav Ezriel was a Talmud of the Ravschlesinger. Many of the German Rabbanim were Talmidim of the Ravschlesinger. He was a Talmud of also Chacham Isaac Barnez. And while he studied in yeshiva, he was also very well educated. He studied classical languages. He married Henrietta Hirsch. I don't believe she was related to Rav Shanshenfeld Hirsch. And the dowry that was given to Rav Ezriel was quite a substantial one, which made him independently wealthy and actually stood him in good stead later on in his life. So in 1851, he became the rabbi of Eisenstadt in Hungary. He first founded a parochial school, and in this school you had to speak correct English. They studied secular studies, which was absolutely necessary in this period of time. Then Rav Ezriel established the yeshiva, where the students had to have significant secular education, and they learned Tanakh, they learned Hebrew grammar, and he started then a postgraduate school for rabbinic students in 1851. He started out with 6 students, and later he had 128 in 1868. He even had students in the United States of America who came to study in his school. As Yoav mentioned before, in 1869, the Orthodox community, who was the minority in Berlin, was granted government permission to secede from the general Jewish community and to establish a separate Orthodox synagogue. They had, as mentioned, 200 families, and they hired Ezriel Hildesheimer, who would sign his name Ezriel Hildesheimer. They hired him as their rabbi. Now, he was aided by a famous personality, Meir Lehman, who is the editor of Israelit in Mainz, and the two of them put in extreme energy to fight the Reform movement, and specifically Abraham Geiger, where they wrote against Abraham Geiger. And the fact that Rav Ezriel was independently wealthy made it that he did not have to accept remuneration for his rabbinic duties, and he was involved in many philanthropic activities, not just here in Germany, but for Jews in Persia and for Jews in Palestine. He built over 75 homes for people in Palestine, for Yidden in Palestine who did not have where to live. Now, he had a very interesting approach to Judaism, and many consider him the founder of what is called modern orthodoxy. So he writes, and he was insistent that for Jews living in Germany, they cannot build a ghetto wall and live secluded from the rest of society, but they need to be fully integrated in society and yet fully committed to religious observance. So he writes as follows. He says, unconditional agreement with the culture of the present-day harmony between Judaism and science, but also unconditional steadfastness in the faith and traditions of Judaism. These constitute the program of the new community. In other words, this was his world outlook, that he needs to combine full integration in society with complete observance. Interesting, as all good Rabbanim, he was put in Cherem by the Talmidei Chassam Sofer. But most notably, Rabbi Kiva Yosef Schlesinger put him in Cherem in 1860, and he ignored the Cherem because Rav Schlesinger himself was also in Cherem. And Rav Schlesinger was a very interesting personality. He was a Talmud of Maram Shik, and he was also a Talmud of the Ksav Sofer. He wrote a Perush on the Chassam Sofer's Tzava called Lev Ivri. And Rav Schlesinger, he had very interesting opinions. He was put in Cherem for saying certain things about the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon. So for certain comments he made about the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershon, he was put in Cherem. He put Rav Ezriel Hildesheimer in Cherem. Rav Ezriel being in Cherem was of little significance, but one of the reasons also Rav Schlesinger personally tried to reinstitute Tkiyah Shofar on Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos. So here we have a Ferish Gemara, you're not to blow Shofar on Rosh Hashanah that comes out on Shabbos, Gezerah de Rabbah, and Rav Schlesinger had a whole pilpul to be Mavatal the Gezerah and to blow the Shofar on Shabbos. So he was also a very big Hanoi. And Rav Hildesheimer, for the time, for Jews living in Germany, they felt they couldn't live in Germany the way they lived in the rest of Europe. So I'm going to share with you one tshuva from Tshuvas Rav Ezriel Hildesheimer, Siman Kuf Pei. Very interesting tshuva. I'm not familiar with anybody else that discusses this issue. Are you allowed to say the name of the Christian Savior? Well, we'll say his first name, Jesus. Could you say that name? And could you say the second name? That's a halachic shaila, because it says V'shem Elohim Achem Loisaskiru. So now he brings in the Gemara, they call him Yeshu, but they never say the anointed one. So says Rav Ezriel, many people they say Christ. He says that's an Isser Dairaisa to say the full two names. To say Jesus, Christ, to say the anointed one is an Isser Dairaisa, because that signifies that he has some kind of significance religiously. But to say the first name, there's no Isser to say the first name. But we cannot deny the fact that Jews for many generations have avoided saying the first name. So therefore he says, I only said it to clarify the halacha. He says to say the second name is Asr. A Jew cannot say Jesus, Christ to spell that is an Isser. But to say the first name is Mutter. But Midas Chasidus is not to say the first name. So that's the psak halacha of Tshuvas Rav Ezriel Hildesheimer Siman Kuf Pei. And today he is considered one of the great leaders of German Jewry. And maybe one day we'll be zeicha to be a little bit closer. But until then, Tehei Menuchasai Kalaid.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.